Police! Open the door. Now.
Hands out when you step outside.
Last warning, we will force entry.
Yo, camera.
The footage opens in infrared. Grainy green hues wash across a residential driveway at 2:47 a.m., September 14, 2021. The security system timestamp pulses in the corner of the frame, marking each second as two figures emerge from a black SUV that killed its headlights 200 feet down the drive. They move with trained precision, short taps on each other's shoulders, military hand signals adapted for criminal purpose. Their tactical vests bear police patches, the word police emblazoned across their chests in reflective lettering. The stitching is close to authentic. The fonts are nearly correct. From a distance, in the dark, most people would believe them. They aren't police. They're cartel contract assassins wearing gear purchased from a darknet vendor, carrying suppressed submachine guns and a thermal breaching charge capable of melting through a reinforced steel door in under 4 seconds. And they picked the wrong address. The house at the end of this driveway belongs to Special Agent Silas Thorne, 23 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, lead investigator on 14 major cartel prosecutions, the man who dismantled the Vegas Syndicate's North American operations in a year-long operation that resulted in 847 arrests and $2.3 billion in seized assets. The cartels have code names for federal agents who cause them problems. Most agents never earn one. Silas has earned 3. Night Cutter came first after he intercepted a midnight shipment that cost the Mendoza family $40 million. Silent Judge followed his testimony that put 11 lieutenants in federal prison. But the name that stuck, the one whispered in safe houses from Sinaloa to Sao Paulo, is simpler. Nightmare. The two men on the driveway don't know they're being watched. They think the cameras are standard residential models, easily avoided, easily fooled. They don't know about the 14-camera system recording their approach from every angle. They don't know about the motion sensors that triggered 3 minutes ago. They don't know about the man inside who has been tracking their progress since their SUV first appeared on the perimeter feed. One of them kneels at the front door, positioning the thermal charge. The other watches the driveway through a handheld infrared scope, scanning for witnesses. Their posture broadcasts intent. This isn't a robbery. This is an execution. Silas Thorne grew up in East Baltimore, in a neighborhood where violence wasn't an abstraction discussed on evening news. It was the texture of daily life. Drug corners 3 blocks from his elementary school, gunshots that became background noise, friends who disappeared into the system or into the ground before they turned 20. His mother worked double shifts at Johns Hopkins, cleaning operating rooms while surgeons saved lives. His father drove a city bus for 31 years, the same route every day, watching the neighborhood change and not change in equal measure. They raised their son with a simple philosophy. The world has rules, and people who follow them build things that last. Most kids from that environment develop survival instincts. They learn to read danger, to avoid certain streets, to recognize the body language of someone about to escalate. Silas learned all of that, but he also did something else. He studied it. While other teenagers were learning to navigate around violence, Silas was analyzing it. Patterns of territorial conflict, the economics of street-level distribution, the psychology of predators who believed they were untouchable. He filled notebooks with observations that read like field research, a teenager conducting anthropological studies of his own neighborhood. His teachers noticed, his guidance counselor noticed, a retired Baltimore detective who coached youth basketball noticed. They all told him the same thing. This mind belonged somewhere it could make a difference. At 17, he enrolled in criminal justice at the University of Maryland. His professors noticed him immediately, not for his grades, which were excellent, but for his questions. He wanted to understand systems, not just cases.
He wanted to know why the same neighborhoods produced the same patterns generation after generation. He wanted to know how to break cycles that seemed unbreakable. The FBI recruited him 6 months before graduation. The recruiter had reviewed his academic work, his internship evaluations, his letters of recommendation. But what sealed the decision was a term paper Silas had written analyzing the organizational structure of Baltimore drug networks, a paper so detailed that the Bureau's Baltimore field office requested a copy for their intelligence files. His early career was marked by a single characteristic. He volunteered for everything dangerous: high-risk surveillance operations, undercover assignments that other agents declined, joint task forces targeting organizations with histories of retaliating against law enforcement. His supervisors tried to slow him down. He ignored them. "I didn't join to be safe," he told one supervisor, who questioned his judgment. "I joined to make other people safe." His case files became models for the academy. Clean warrants, no procedural shortcuts that defense attorneys could exploit. Airtight evidence chains, every piece of documentation verified, every witness prepared, every contingency anticipated. 0 acquittals on cases he led. 0. The Vega syndicate operation took 14 months. Silas ran it from a command center that processed intelligence from 16 field offices, coordinating simultaneous raids across 3 countries. The syndicate had operated for 22 years, building a distribution network that moved product from Colombia through Mexico into 37 American cities. They had survived 4 previous federal investigations, 3 changes in cartel leadership, and the arrests of over 200 mid-level operatives. They didn't survive Silas. When federal agents knocked on the door of cartel kingpin Eduardo Vega at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, Silas was the one holding the warrant. He read Eduardo his rights personally. He escorted him to the transport vehicle. He watched as the man who had ordered the deaths of dozens of people, witnesses, competitors, federal informants, was loaded into a vehicle that would take him to a cell he would never leave. The arrest made international news. The syndicate's leadership structure collapsed within weeks. Their North American distribution network, built over 2 decades, evaporated in a single coordinated strike. Retaliation was expected. Silas knew it was coming. The Bureau offered relocation. He declined. They offered enhanced security details. He declined those, too. "I didn't join to be safe," he told one supervisor, who questioned his judgment. "I joined to make other people safe." He stayed in his house. He upgraded his security system, and he waited.
The security footage captures the assassin's final approach in clinical detail. The one with the thermal charge has positioned it against the door's lower hinge point, a professional placement that suggests military training or cartel instruction. The other has moved to cover the side entrance, anticipating that a target might flee toward a secondary exit. They communicate in whispers the audio sensors barely capture. Spanish, Mexican dialect, professional terminology mixed with cartel slang. 30 segundos. 30 seconds until breach. Inside the house, Silas Thorne sits in a room that doesn't appear on any architectural plans filed with the county. A command center built into what was originally a basement storage area, accessible through a reinforced door disguised as a closet. 14 monitors display feeds from cameras covering every angle of his property. 3 keyboards connect to systems that control exterior lighting, automated barriers, and a communication array linked directly to the FBI's emergency response network. He has been watching them for 11 minutes. He identified the SUV when it first appeared on the perimeter camera, running the plates through a federal database that returned a rental agreement traced to a shell company with documented cartel connections. He activated the silent alarm 4 minutes ago.
Federal response teams are already en route, estimated arrival in 7 minutes. The assassins have 30 seconds until they breach. The response teams have 7 minutes until they arrive. The math creates a gap that Silas will have to fill himself. He doesn't panic. Panic is for people who haven't prepared. Silas has run this scenario in his mind hundreds of times, refining protocols, anticipating variables, planning for exactly this moment. He reviews the camera feeds one more time. 2 targets at the front door. 1 driver in the SUV, engine still running. No additional personnel visible on any angle. 3 hostiles total. His service weapon sits in a holster on his hip. A secondary weapon is mounted beneath the console. A tactical vest hangs on a hook beside the door, pre-configured with the equipment he might need. On monitor 6, the assassin with the thermal charge reaches for the ignition switch. Silas flips a switch on his console. 7,000 lumens of halogen light explode across the front porch. The security footage whites out for half a second before the cameras adjust, revealing 2 men frozen in the glare like animals caught on a highway. The thermal charge clatters to the concrete. The assassin who was holding it throws his arm across his eyes, blinded. His partner spins toward the light source, raising his weapon toward nothing he can see. A voice cuts through the night, calm, surgical, amplified through exterior speakers mounted beneath the eaves. "You're 3 seconds away from a federal casket. Drop the hardware." The assassin with the weapon doesn't drop it. He pivots, trying to identify the source of the voice, trying to find a target. His partner scrambles for the thermal charge, still believing they can complete the mission.
They don't understand what's happening. They don't understand where they are. Silas gives them the 3 seconds he promised. Then he triggers the automated bollards. Steel columns rocket up from slots hidden in the driveway's surface, 6 of them positioned to form a cage around the SUV. The driver inside panics, slamming the vehicle into reverse. The bumper collides with a bollard that doesn't move. He tries forward, same result. The SUV is pinned, immobilized, trapped in a steel cage that rose from the ground in under 2 seconds. The assassins on the porch realize simultaneously that their extraction is gone. Their confidence collapses visibly on the footage, shoulders dropping, heads turning toward each other with expressions that translate across any language. They've been played. Silas exits through a side door that doesn't appear on any building plans. He moves low and fast, using shadows the floodlights create, rather than the light itself. His weapon is drawn, but controlled, tracking the assassin who still holds the submachine gun. The man with the gun sees movement. He fires, 3 rounds, suppressed, barely louder than a cough. The bullets strike the brick facade 4 feet from where Silas was a half-second earlier. He's already moved, circling toward the porch from an angle the shooters can't cover. A flashbang detonates. It was hidden in the porch eaves, positioned there 3 years ago for exactly this scenario. The footage captures both men stumbling, hands over their ears, disoriented by the blast. Silas covers the distance in 4 seconds. The first assassin goes down to a precision leg sweep, a technique from Silas's combatives training, executed with the efficiency of someone who has practiced it 10,000 times. The man hits the concrete hard, the breath driven from his lungs, his weapon skittering across the porch. The second tries to raise his submachine gun. Silas is inside his guard before the barrel comes up. 3 movements: strip the weapon, control the arm, drive the body to the ground. The assassin's face impacts the concrete with enough force to break his nose. Blood spreads across the porch in the floodlight glare. Zip ties secure both men to the porch railing in under 30 seconds. The driver in the SUV makes a decision. He abandons the vehicle, kicking open the door, trying to flee on foot. The bollards block the driveway, but there's open ground beyond them, grass,
trees, the possibility of escape. He makes it 15 feet. Silas doesn't chase him. He doesn't need to. The perimeter sensors tracked the driver's exit from the vehicle. The motion-activated cameras followed his trajectory. And the federal response vehicles that have been closing for the past 6 minutes are now visible on the street, lights flashing, cutting off every exit route. The driver drops to his knees before anyone orders him to. His hands go behind his head. He knows it's over. Silas stands on his porch, breathing controlled, weapon holstered. The security cameras capture his face, calm, focused, showing no more stress than a man who has just completed a routine task. 3 hostiles, all neutralized, 0 casualties. The response teams pour onto the property, federal agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn, clearing the area with professional efficiency. They find Silas standing over 2 zip-tied assassins, his expression suggesting mild inconvenience rather than survival of an assassination attempt. "You could have waited for us," one agent says. "They didn't give me 7 minutes," Silas replies.
The assassins break within hours. Federal interrogation protocols, combined with the footage of their failed operation, create psychological pressure that neither man can withstand. They provide everything: names, locations, communication channels, financial accounts. They identify their cartel employer, a Vegas syndicate splinter group that never accepted Eduardo's arrest. They describe the planning process, the dark net purchases, the target selection. They explain that Silas Thorne was chosen specifically because of his role in the syndicate's collapse, a message killing designed to warn other federal agents about the cost of effectiveness. The message failed. Within 72 hours, the intelligence extracted from the interrogations leads federal agents to a warehouse in suburban Houston. Inside, they find the financial infrastructure of the splinter group, servers containing transaction records, cryptocurrency wallets, and communication logs documenting 4 years of money laundering operations. The seizure totals $450 million in traceable assets, the largest single forfeiture in the Bureau's history. Additional raids follow: 14 locations across 6 states, 47 arrests. The splinter group's leadership structure, already weakened by the failed assassination, collapses entirely. Members turn on each other, seeking reduced sentences in exchange for testimony. The organization that sent killers to silence the nightmare ceased to exist within 90 days. The footage from Silas's security system goes public 3 weeks after the incident, following clearance from federal prosecutors. Within 48 hours, it becomes the most viewed clip of 2021. The moment that captures public attention isn't the bollards rising, though that plays well on cable news. It isn't the flashbang or the takedown, though analysts break those down frame by frame. It's the final shot: Silas standing over the 2 disarmed assassins, calm enough that he might be waiting for a bus, his expression suggesting that this interruption to his evening was mildly annoying rather than life-threatening. Social media creates hashtags that trend for weeks. Hashtag Nightmare Protocol. Hashtag Thorne is coming. Memes proliferate, Silas's face superimposed over action movie posters, his calm expression contrasted with increasingly absurd scenarios. Late-night hosts make jokes. News anchors struggle to maintain composure while reporting on the most embarrassing assassination attempt in cartel history. Security experts appear on talk shows, breaking down the tactical systems Silas had installed and marveling at the preparation that turned a kill mission into a self-inflicted wound. The cartels don't find it funny. In safe houses across 3 countries, the footage circulates as a warning. The man they call Nightmare isn't just effective in courtrooms and raid operations, he's untouchable in his own home. He turned their best contractors into federal witnesses. He used their assassination attempt to destroy what remained of their organization. The code name becomes something else, not a warning about an effective agent, a warning about a man who shouldn't be touched under any circumstances.
The federal case moved with unusual speed. Attempted assassination of a federal officer triggers automatic maximum penalties. The evidence was comprehensive: security footage, weapon forensics, detailed confessions, financial records linking the defendants to cartel payment structures. Both assassins faced trial separately. Both trials lasted less than a week. Both juries deliberated less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The driver, who had remained in the SUV until the final moments, accepted a plea agreement in exchange for testimony against his employers. He received 25 years, a sentence that reflected his cooperation but acknowledged his participation in what would have been a murder.
The sentencing hearing for the two primary assassins took place on a February morning, 6 months after the incident. The courtroom was filled with federal agents, prosecutors, and journalists who had followed the case from the first viral video. The judge reviewed the pre-sentencing reports with visible contempt. "You came to this country wearing fake police uniforms, carrying illegal weapons, intending to murder a man in his own home. You targeted him specifically because he was effective at his job, because he had the courage and the skill to dismantle criminal organizations that destroy communities." She paused. "You tried to end the life of a man who dedicated his career to protecting the innocent. You failed, and now you will spend the rest of your productive years in a federal facility, contemplating that failure. 40 years, Supermax facility. 0 possibility of parole." The assassins were led from the courtroom in chains. Neither looked at Silas, who sat in the gallery with the same calm expression he had worn over their prone bodies 6 months earlier. The Department of Justice announced the policy changes 3 months after sentencing. Sweeping new protections for federal officers facing cartel-leveled retaliation. Enhanced funding for home security systems, rapid response protocols that reduced average arrival times from 11 minutes to under 5, intelligence sharing agreements that flagged potential threats before they materialized into assassination attempts. They called it the Thorn Protocol. The name wasn't Silas's choice. He argued against personalizing the policy, suggesting that attaching his name would make it about him rather than the agents it was designed to protect. He was overruled. "You survived something that should have killed you. You turned it into the largest asset seizure in Bureau history. You gave us footage that changed how the public understands federal law enforcement. Your name on this protocol isn't vanity, it's a message." The message was clear. Federal agents who did their jobs effectively would be protected. The cost of targeting them would be absolute. The protocol included provisions Silas had recommended based on his own experience: mandatory security assessments for agents working cartel cases, subsidized installation of perimeter monitoring systems, direct communication links to response teams that bypassed standard dispatch procedures. Training programs incorporated the footage from September 14th. New agents watched the approach, the confrontation, the neutralization. They studied Silas's preparation, his calm under fire, his ability to transform a defensive position into an offensive advantage. Silas returned to fieldwork within 8 months. His first case back was a trafficking investigation spanning 4 states, the kind of complex, multi-jurisdictional operation he had built his reputation on. He ran it with the same precision that had characterized his entire career. Clean warrants, airtight evidence, 0 shortcuts. The media attention faded, as media attention always does. The memes disappeared into internet archives. The hashtags stopped trending. Life resumed its normal rhythms. But in certain circles, in cartel safe houses, in criminal planning sessions, in the calculations that organizations make before targeting law enforcement, something had changed. The footage from that September night circulated as a warning. The bollards rising, the flashbang detonating, the 2 assassins, trained killers, reduced to zip-tied prisoners in under a minute. The nightmare was real, and he was still working. Silas never gave interviews about the incident.
He declined book deals, documentary proposals, speaking invitations. When journalists approached him at court appearances or press conferences, he deflected with the same answer every time. I did my job, the system worked. There's nothing to celebrate about surviving something that shouldn't have happened in the first place. He still lives in the same house. The security system has been upgraded twice since the incident. Newer cameras, faster response integration, additional layers of protection that he designed himself. The bollards remain installed, though they've never been triggered again. The command center still monitors 14 camera feeds, tracking every vehicle that passes the perimeter. His neighbors know who he is now. They didn't before. He had lived there for 7 years as a quiet federal employee who kept his lawn maintained and his interactions minimal. After the footage went public, they understood why he had always seemed alert, always seemed to be watching, always seemed prepared for something they couldn't imagine. One neighbor, a retired teacher who had waved at Silas for years without knowing anything about him, brought over a casserole the week after the incident. She stood on the porch where 2 assassins had been zip-tied to the railing and handed him the dish. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "I just wanted you to know we're glad you're okay." Silas accepted the casserole. He thanked her. He didn't explain that okay wasn't really the right word, that he had been okay throughout the incident, that panic had never entered the equation, that the only thing he felt afterward was mild irritation at the disruption to his sleep schedule. He didn't explain because he knew she wouldn't understand. Most people wouldn't. The idea of facing armed assassins with the same emotional register as facing a traffic delay wasn't something that translated easily. Another neighbor asked him months later if he ever felt afraid, if the knowledge that people wanted him dead ever kept him awake at night. Silas considered the question. "Fear is for people who don't prepare," he said. "I prepare, every day, for everything I can anticipate and most things I can't. The night they came for me, I was ready. If they come again, I'll be ready again." He paused. That's not courage. That's just work. The footage remains archived in federal evidence storage, in news databases, in training materials used by law enforcement agencies worldwide. It shows a driveway at 2:47 a.m., 2 men in fake police uniforms, a thermal breaching charge positioned against a door. And it shows what happens when preparation meets opportunity, when a man who spent his entire career studying predators finally became the prey and proved that the role reversal changed nothing. The assassins thought they were hunting a target. They discovered they were walking into a trap built by someone who had anticipated them years before they existed. His mother still lives in Baltimore. She watched the footage once when it first went public and called him afterward. "I raised you to follow the rules," she said. "I didn't raise you to fight cartel hitmen on your front porch." "The rules say I have a right to defend my home," Silas replied. "I was just following them more thoroughly than most people." She laughed. It was the only time he heard anyone laugh about the incident. His father, before he passed, had a different reaction. He watched the footage 3 times, pausing at the moment when Silas emerged from the side door, moving low and fast toward armed men who had come to kill him. "You were always like this," his father said. "Even when you were a kid, you never ran from anything. You just figured out how to handle it." "I taught you that," Silas said. "I taught you to drive a bus," his father replied. "Whatever that is on the video, you learned somewhere else." The cartel sent killers to silence a nightmare. The nightmare sent them to prison, and then he went back to work.
Officer, what exactly am I being confronted for?
Step back from the car. We got a call about you.
A call for what? I'm putting groceries in my trunk.
You fit the description. That's all you need to know.
The seat's right here. You haven't asked to see it.
Turn around. Hands behind your back.
You're detaining me without probable cause. My name is Byron Ashford. I'm sure you recognize the name.
The Westfield Shopping Center parking lot sat half full on a Saturday afternoon. Families loaded groceries into minivans. A child rode in a shopping cart while his mother pushed.
An elderly couple walked arm in arm toward the entrance. Somewhere near the pharmacy, a car alarm chirped once and fell silent. The timestamp on the Bodycam footage would later read 14:23:17. Byron Ashford stood at the open trunk of his silver sedan, placing grocery bags into the cargo space with methodical care. 2 large brown paper bags, heavy with produce and staples. A smaller plastic bag with eggs positioned carefully so nothing would shift during the drive home. His receipt was folded in his left hand, a habit from years of expense tracking, of documenting everything. He wore a charcoal suit, tailored precisely, with a light blue dress shirt open at the collar. He had come from the office, stopping for groceries on his way home. His briefcase sat in the back seat. His bar identification was in his wallet. His business cards were in a leather case in his jacket pocket. 23 years in law, 8 as a city prosecutor building cases against financial criminals and corrupt officials. His conviction rate in that office had become a benchmark. 15 years since as senior associate at Ashford and Sterling LLP, the firm his father had founded 4 decades earlier. Corporate litigation now, but the prosecutor's instincts remained. The attention to evidence, the awareness of procedure, the understanding that documentation was everything. Every other Saturday, he volunteered at a community center on the city's east side, teaching teenagers their constitutional rights during police encounters. He walked them through detention procedures, search limitations, the difference between a request and a lawful order. He taught them to stay calm, to keep their hands visible, to ask clarifying questions without escalating. He taught them everything he knew. The patrol car entered from the south entrance, moving faster than the posted limit. It cut across 2 lanes of traffic, drawing a honk from a minivan that had to brake suddenly. The driver's door opened before the vehicle had fully stopped. Officer Kevin Driscoll stepped out, 29 years old, 3 years on the force, 1 prior complaint in his personnel file, dismissed after a brief internal review. His hand moved immediately to his holstered taser. His tactical flashlight swung into frame, activated despite the bright afternoon sunlight. His breathing was already elevated, audible on the Bodycam's microphone before he had taken 3 steps. He crossed the lot in aggressive strides, closing distance with the urgency of someone responding to an active threat. There was no active threat. There was a man loading groceries. "Step away from the vehicle. Hands behind your head. We got a report of a guy matching your description shoplifting high-end electronics." Byron turned, a grocery bag still in his hands. Confusion crossed his face, followed by the careful assessment of a man who had spent decades reading hostile witnesses. He set the bag down slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and visible. "Officer, these are groceries." He raised his left hand, receipt visible between his fingers. "My receipt is right here. You're welcome to—" The officer lunged forward. The frame jolted violently. Officer Driscoll's hand closed around Byron's wrist before he could finish his sentence. In one motion, he spun the attorney around and slammed him against the open trunk of the sedan. Metal thudded against metal. The grocery bags shifted. Inside one of them, the sharp crack of eggs breaking was audible on the Bodycam's microphone. Byron's cheek pressed against the cold metal of the trunk lid. His suit jacket bunched awkwardly around his shoulders. The receipt fluttered from his fingers, drifting to the pavement beside a wheel well. "I said, hands behind your head." "Officer, that's completely unnecessary." His voice remained controlled, the same measured tone he used when cross-examining hostile witnesses. "My hands were visible. I was cooperating." Yeah, everyone's innocent." The officer's voice carried mockery the Bodycam recorded with perfect clarity. "Funny suit, though. He played dress-up for work?" The handcuffs appeared. Metal glinted in the afternoon sunlight. The ratcheting sound cut through the ambient noise of the parking lot. The cuffs clicked tight, too tight. The edges bit into Byron's wrists. "I'm detaining you for investigation. You fit the description of a suspect in a theft." "What description?"
Black male, medium build. What was the suspect wearing? What was he allegedly stealing? What store reported the theft? No answer. The officer's hand pressed against Byron's back, keeping him pinned to the trunk. The Bodycam captured the angle, looking down at a man in a tailored suit, face pressed against his own car, grocery bags visible in the cargo space behind him. "Officer, my receipt is on the ground. It shows I purchased groceries from the market 20 minutes ago. It will verify everything I've told you." The receipt lay 6 inches from the officer's boot, white paper against gray asphalt, time-stamped, itemized. Officer Driscoll didn't look down. "Let's see what you're hiding." Without consent, without legal basis, Officer Driscoll began searching Byron's pockets. His gloved hands patted down the suit jacket, reaching into the interior pocket, extracting items one by one. A leather wallet, well-worn, containing credit cards, a driver's license, and cash the officer counted aloud. A smartphone, screen locked, notifications visible, calendar reminders for Monday meetings, a text from his wife asking about dinner, and a business card case, black leather, embossed with subtle gold lettering. The officer flipped it open. Byron Ashford, Senior Associate, Ashford and Sterling, LLP. And beneath it, in a separate slot, a laminated card with a photograph and an official seal. State Bar Identification, member in good standing. The officer's hands stopped moving. The Bodycam recorded the shift in his breathing, sudden shallowness, a pause that lasted 3 seconds too long. His gloves trembled slightly at the edges of the frame. "You're a lawyer?" "I've been trying to tell you that. I'm also a former city prosecutor, 8 years in this county's criminal courts. I know half the judges personally." A voice called out from somewhere behind them. The Bodycam's audio picked it up clearly. "Hey, he wasn't doing anything." Another voice, female, closer. "I literally had groceries. I saw him buy them." The parking lot that had seemed empty now contained a growing audience. A woman with a shopping cart had stopped 10 feet away, phone raised and recording. A man in a delivery uniform stood near a white van, also filming. A mother had pulled her children close, watching with an expression of someone who understood exactly what they were witnessing. The officer's head turned slightly, acknowledging the witnesses for the first time. "Quit moving. I'm conducting an investigation." "I haven't moved since you put me in handcuffs." His composure remained absolute. "You've ignored the receipt. You've ignored my explanation. You've ignored the witnesses. That camera on your chest is recording every misstep." Byron turned his head slowly until he was looking directly into the Bodycam lens. The afternoon light illuminated his face. Calm, focused, controlled. He took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice carried the cadence of a courtroom. "Officer, let me explain what you've done today." The officer's hand remained on Byron's back, but the pressure had eased. The confidence that had driven him across the parking lot was draining away. "You've detained me without probable cause. Black male, medium build, matches approximately 20% of the adult male population in this city. You've dismissed exculpatory evidence. My receipt was in my hand, and I offered to show it to you before you touched me. You've used excessive force on a cooperative citizen who never resisted. You've conducted a search without consent." He paused, letting silence emphasize what came next. "And you've done all of this while wearing a camera that recorded everything, every word, every action." Officer Driscoll's gloves slipped slightly against the trunk. His breathing had become shallow. "My name is Byron Ashford. I'm a senior associate at Ashford and Sterling, LLP. I'm a former city prosecutor who spent 8 years in this county's criminal courts. And what you've done today is hand me the keys to the city treasury. Look, I just need to verify. You chose not to verify anything. You had every opportunity to investigate before you detained me. You chose force instead. All right, let's just... The officer's voice had become small. Let's just sort this out. We will, in civil court, in disciplinary hearings, and in the press when that footage is released. The body cam trembled, visible motion at the edges of the frame. The second patrol car arrived without sirens, pulling into a space 30 feet away. Sergeant Maria Vasquez stepped out. 16 years on the force, a reputation for thorough, by-the-book supervision. She assessed the scene as she approached. Man in a suit, handcuffed against the trunk of a silver sedan, grocery bags in the cargo space, receipt on the ground, multiple civilians with phones raised. Officer Driscoll, what's going on here? He, fit the description of a suspect in a theft. A theft of what? Electronics, high-end electronics from one of the stores. Which store? Silence. Did you verify the call with dispatch? Longer silence. Byron spoke without turning round. There was no call verified. There was no specific description, no probable cause, and the receipt that would have exonerated me immediately has been lying on the ground for the past 10 minutes. Sergeant Vasquez looked at the ground. She looked at the receipt. She bent down and picked it up, examining the timestamp, the itemized list of groceries, the total. He had this when you arrived? In his hand, I confirmed. I offered to show it. He slammed me against the car instead. She looked at Sergeant Driscoll with an expression that needed no interpretation. What else did you find during your search? He held up the business card case with trembling fingers. Sergeant Vasquez took it, opened it, saw the name, the firm, the bar identification with its official seal. You detained a senior associate, a former city prosecutor. I didn't know. You didn't ask. She turned to Byron. Take the cuffs off, now. Officer Driscoll fumbled with his keys. The handcuffs clicked open, falling away from wrists that already bore red marks. Byron turned slowly, rubbing his wrists with deliberate care, cataloging injuries for future documentation. He adjusted his suit jacket, smoothed his collar, retrieved his wallet, his phone, and his business card case from the trunk where the officer had placed them. I'll need your badge number, your full name, your supervisor's name, the incident number, and the CAD log for whatever call supposedly prompted this encounter. Of course, sir, Sergeant Vasquez said. I'll provide everything myself. Byron picked up his grocery bags, including the one with the cracked eggs, yolks already seeping through the paper. He placed them in his trunk with methodical care. I'll also need a copy of the body cam footage, all of it, starting from the moment he entered the parking lot. That will need to go through official channels. It will go through whatever channels I choose to pursue, and I choose to pursue them all.
Internal Affairs opened within 48 hours. The footage left no room for interpretation. Officer Driscoll had responded to a call that was never verified with dispatch. No record existed. He had detained a citizen based on a description so vague it was functionally meaningless. He had ignored exculpatory evidence offered before any force was used. He had conducted a search without consent. He had applied excessive force to a cooperative citizen. His incident report, filed 3 hours after the encounter, bore no resemblance to reality. It described a suspicious individual who had refused to comply with lawful orders and had made furtive movements toward his pockets. It claimed the receipt had never been visible, that the identification had only been discovered after the detention was complete, that the force used was reasonable under the circumstances. The body cam showed Byron lifting his receipt before he was touched, showed him explaining, showed the officer lunging before those words were finished, showed the slam, the cuffs, the search conducted without a single question asked.
The Department of Justice opened a federal civil rights investigation within the week. The district attorney's office faced an unusual situation. Byron had worked there for 8 years. He had trained some of the current prosecutors. The office recused those who had worked with him directly, but the case proceeded with the rigor the evidence demanded. Officer Kevin Driscoll was charged with official misconduct, battery, civil rights violations, and filing a false police report. The trial lasted 4 days. The Bodycam footage was played for the jury 3 times. Byron testified for 2 hours, walking through each moment of the encounter with precision. The jury deliberated less than 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing took place 6 weeks later. "You had a badge," the judge said. "You had training. You had a camera recording every action you took, and you still chose to violate a citizen's constitutional rights based on nothing more than the color of his skin and the neighborhood where he was shopping." Officer Driscoll stood with his head bowed. 5 years in state prison, 3 years probation upon release, permanent revocation of your law enforcement certification. The gavel fell. The civil case proceeded on a parallel track. Byron's firm did not represent him directly, a conflict of interest, but the attorneys they recommended were among the best civil rights litigators in the state. The city's legal team watched the Bodycam footage in a conference room on the 12th floor of the municipal building. They watched it 4 times. They consulted with their insurance carrier. They calculated the cost of a jury trial, not just the financial exposure, but the reputational damage, the political fallout, the image of a senior associate with a flawless record being slammed against his own car while holding a receipt for groceries. They settled for $7 million. The announcement came 5 months after the incident. Byron stood at a podium in front of the county courthouse, flanked by his attorneys. "This settlement is not about money," he said. "I've spent my career believing in the law. I've prosecuted criminals. I've defended corporations. I've argued before judges and juries." He paused. What happened in that parking lot had nothing to do with evidence. An officer saw a black man in a nice suit loading groceries into a nice car, and he decided that didn't make sense. He decided I didn't belong. He was so certain of that assumption that he ignored the receipt in my hand, the explanation I was giving, and every principle of law enforcement he had sworn to uphold. The settlement funds were allocated according to a plan Byron had developed in the weeks following the incident, a portion to criminal justice reform organizations, a portion to his community legal education program, expanding it to serve more teenagers, a portion to establish scholarships for law students from underrepresented communities. The city council, under pressure from footage that had circulated nationally, passed new legislation within 3 months. The Ashford mandate required immediate release of any Bodycam footage involving claims of racial profiling. No more delays, no more technical difficulties, no more convenient failures. "No more lost tapes," Byron said at the signing ceremony. "When an officer acts, the public has a right to see it." Officer Kevin Driscoll served his sentence at a state correctional facility 200 miles from the city where he had once worn a badge. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. His name was entered into the Brady-Giglio database, ensuring that any future employer in any jurisdiction would know. He was unemployable in law enforcement. He would remain so for life. The department that had employed him underwent mandatory retraining. Every officer completed a 40-hour course on constitutional rights, racial bias, and proper detention procedures. The training materials included footage from the Ashford incident, with legal experts explaining exactly what went wrong at each stage. Sergeant Maria Vasquez was promoted to lieutenant, recognized for her handling of a situation that could have escalated further. She spoke at community forums, acknowledging the department's failures and outlining changes. Byron returned to his practice, continued his work in corporate litigation, his reputation enhanced rather than diminished.
Clients who had heard about the incident sought him out specifically, trusting a man who had demonstrated composure under impossible circumstances. He continued his Saturday volunteer sessions at the community center. His lessons now included a first-hand account of what could happen even when you did everything right. "I kept my hands visible," he told the teenagers. "I spoke calmly. I offered evidence. I didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't escalate. And I was still slammed against my car and handcuffed while people watched." They listened with an attention that had intensified since the footage went viral. So why do we still teach these techniques? Because they matter. Not because they guarantee safety, nothing guarantees that, but because they create a record. They establish what you did and what was done to you. They give you evidence when it's time to demand accountability. He paused. The camera on that officer's chest recorded everything. His violations, my composure, the truth. And when it was over, the truth was what mattered. The footage remains archived in federal databases, in news archives, in training materials used by police departments across the country. It shows a parking lot on a Saturday afternoon, a man loading groceries into his car, an officer who saw something that wasn't there and acted on assumptions that destroyed his career. And it shows a receipt lying on the asphalt, ignored until it was too late. Byron still shops at the same grocery store, still loads purchases into the same silver sedan, still wears tailored suits on weekdays and comfortable clothes on weekends, still believes in the law, not because it protected him in that parking lot, but because it held accountable the man who violated it. His wife asked him once if he ever thought about shopping somewhere else, somewhere without the memory. He considered the question for a long moment before answering. "That parking lot is just a parking lot. What happened there doesn't define the place, it defines the officer who made those choices, and he's paying for them now." The community center where he volunteers expanded its program after the settlement funds arrived. More teenagers, more neighborhoods, more Saturday sessions where young people learned what Byron had spent his career teaching, that the law exists to protect everyone, that rights are not granted but inherent, and that documentation is the difference between a story and evidence. One of the teenagers asked him, months after the incident, whether he had been afraid. Not afraid, angry. But anger doesn't help in those moments. What helps is knowing exactly what's happening and exactly what it means. The officer thought he had power because he had a badge and a gun, but I had something he didn't have. What? I had the truth, and I had a camera recording it. The story ended without celebration. No speeches of triumph, no moment where the officer admitted he was wrong or understood what he had done. It ended with a man who kept his composure when composure was all he had, who documented everything, who waited for the system to work and then made it work when it failed him. The Bodycam recorded the truth, and the truth, eventually, was enough.
Sir, why are you on my property?
We got a call. Step out of the doorway.
A call for what exactly?
You don't look like you belong here. Turn around.
You're giving orders without a warrant or probable cause.
I don't need to explain myself.
For the record, you're not free to leave.
The house on Maple Ridge Drive had stood for 63 years, a colonial revival with red brick walls and white shutters that caught the afternoon light. It occupied a quarter-acre lot in one of the city's most established neighborhoods, the kind of street where children rode bicycles on weekends and neighbors waved from their porches. Oak trees lined the sidewalks, their branches forming a canopy that dappled the sunlight into shifting patterns on the pavement below. For 20 years, Justice Olivia Calder had built a reputation as one of the most formidable figures in the state's legal system. Her rulings were studied in law schools. Her dissents were quoted in appellate arguments across the country. She had written majority opinions that expanded civil rights protections, that held corporations accountable for environmental damage, that ensured due process for defendants who had been denied it by lower courts. Defense attorneys respected her fairness. Prosecutors trusted her judgment. Fellow justices sought her counsel on matters of constitutional interpretation. She had fought institutional corruption from the bench for 2 decades. She had ruled against police departments that violated citizens' rights. She had written scathing opinions about officers who believed their badges placed them above the law they had sworn to uphold. But none of that would matter on this peaceful Tuesday afternoon when she stepped outside to check her mail. The timestamp on the Bodycam footage would later read 14:47:22. The temperature was 73 degrees. A light breeze rustled the leaves of the maple tree in her front yard. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower hummed its steady rhythm. Justice Calder wore a gray t-shirt and black sweatpants, the comfortable clothes of someone enjoying a day off from the bench. Her reading glasses were pushed up on her forehead. She had been reviewing case files in her study when she remembered the mail carrier had come earlier. She walked down her front path in bare feet, the warm concrete familiar beneath her soles. She had lived in this house for 17 years. She had raised 2 children here. She had hosted holiday dinners and summer barbecues. Her neighbors knew her by name. The postal carrier had delivered her mail for over a decade. The patrol car appeared at the end of the block, moving slowly at first, then accelerating. It pulled to the curb in front of her property with a sharp chirp of brakes. The door opened before the engine had fully stopped. Officer Ryan Mercer stepped out. He was 31 years old, with 4 years on the force, and a personnel file that contained 2 prior complaints, both dismissed, both involving confrontations with black residents in affluent neighborhoods. His hand moved immediately to his service weapon, not drawing it, resting on it, a gesture that communicated threat without explicit action. He walked up her driveway as if he owned it. "What's going on here?" Justice Calder turned from her mailbox, a handful of envelopes in her hand. Her expression shifted from surprise to assessment. She had seen this posture before, in courtrooms, in depositions, in the testimony of officers who believed their authority was absolute. "I'm checking my mail." Her voice was calm, measured, the same tone she used when questioning attorneys who had failed to prepare their arguments. "Why are you on my property?" "Step away from the door." The words were not a request, they were a command, delivered with the expectation of immediate compliance. Officer Mercer continued up her driveway, closing the distance between them with deliberate strides. "Excuse me?" Justice Calder remained where she stood. "What's going on?" "You don't belong here." His voice was sharp, dismissive. "Turn around now." The Bodycam captured everything: the afternoon light, the red brick of the house, the woman in casual clothes holding her mail, and the officer advancing toward her with his hand on his weapon. The audio picked up the distant lawnmower, the rustle of leaves, and the steady cadence of an encounter that was about to spiral beyond control. Justice Calder did not turn around. She did not step away from her door. She stood her ground on the property she had owned for 17 years, in front of the house where she had built her life, and she asked the question that any citizen had the right to ask. "What is your probable cause for being on my property?" Officer Mercer's jaw tightened. The Bodycam captured the shift in his expression, the flicker of irritation that crossed his face when he encountered resistance instead of compliance. He had expected fear. He had expected submission. He had expected the automatic deference that his uniform usually commanded. "I don't need to explain myself to you." "Actually, you do." Justice Calder's voice remained steady. 20 years on the bench had taught her how to control her tone under pressure, how to project calm authority even when facing hostility.
"This is my private property. You have no warrant. You have no probable cause. You have no legal basis to be here." We got a call about a suspicious person. A suspicious person doing what? Checking her mail at her own house? The officer stepped closer. His body language was aggressive now, shoulders squared, chin lifted. The Bodycam angle shifted as he moved, capturing Justice Calder from above, a framing that made her appear smaller, more vulnerable, even as her words carried the weight of legal precision. "You don't look like you belong in this neighborhood." The words hung in the air. The Bodycam recorded them with perfect clarity. The lawnmower continued its distant hum. The afternoon light remained golden and warm. And in that single sentence, Officer Ryan Mercer had revealed the true nature of his presence on her property. Justice Calder's expression didn't change. She had heard variations of this sentiment before, in case files, in testimony, in the countless encounters she had reviewed from the bench. She knew what it meant. She knew what it revealed. "I've lived here for 17 years, she said. "I suggest you leave my property before you make this situation worse for yourself. I'll leave when I'm satisfied you're supposed to be here." He reached for his handcuffs. "Turn around and put your hands on the wall." "No." The refusal was quiet but absolute. Justice Calder did not raise her voice. She did not step backward. She stood in her own driveway, on her own property, and she declined to submit to an unlawful order. That wasn't a request. And this isn't a lawful detention. You have no reasonable suspicion of any crime. You have no probable cause. You're on private property without a warrant and without consent. Everything you're doing right now is being recorded by your own camera. Officer Mercer's breathing changed. The Bodycam's microphone picked up the acceleration, the shallow inhales of a man whose authority was being challenged by someone who understood the law better than he did. His hand moved from his handcuffs to Justice Calder's wrist. He grabbed her. His fingers closed around her wrist with force that would leave bruises. In one motion, he spun her toward the brick wall of her own home, pressing her against the rough surface. The mail scattered from her hand, envelopes drifting to the concrete, a magazine sliding across the driveway. The Bodycam captured the violence in shaking frames. The lens tilted as Officer Mercer maneuvered her against the wall. The audio recorded the scrape of shoes on concrete, the officer's heavy breathing, the soft grunt of impact as Justice Calder's shoulder struck brick. She did not struggle. She did not resist. She kept her hands visible, her movements controlled, even as her cheek pressed against the wall of the house she had called home for nearly 2 decades. "You are making a serious mistake," she said. Her voice was strained but steady. "Everything you're doing is being documented." "Shut up." He pulled her wrists behind her back. The handcuffs appeared, metal glinting in the afternoon light. He ratcheted them tight, too tight, the edges biting into her skin. "What are you charging me with?" "Trespassing, resisting arrest." "Trespassing on my own property?" Despite her position, despite the pain in her wrists, a note of something almost like pity entered her voice. "You're going to regret this." Officer Mercer leaned close. His face was inches from her ear. The Bodycam captured his profile, the clenched jaw, the sweat beginning to form at his temple, the rigid posture of a man who had committed to a course of action and couldn't find his way back. And then he spoke a word, barely a whisper, almost inaudible to anyone else. But the Bodycam's microphone was sensitive. It was designed to capture evidence, and it recorded that single syllable with perfect, damning clarity. Justice Calder closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her expression had changed. The careful neutrality was gone, replaced by something colder, something that officers who had appeared before her bench would have recognized immediately. "Officer," she said, her voice carrying a new edge, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." She turned her head slowly, deliberately, until she was looking directly into the Bodycam lens. The afternoon light caught her face, illuminating features that had graced legal publications, that had appeared on news broadcasts during landmark rulings, that were familiar to anyone who followed the state's judicial system. "For the record," she said, her voice clear and precise, each word articulated with the careful diction of someone accustomed to being transcribed, "I am State Supreme Court Justice Olivia Calder." The officer's grip loosened almost imperceptibly. "This is my home. I have lived here for 17 years. I am within my constitutional rights. You are trespassing on private property. You have committed assault. You have made a false arrest without probable cause. And you have just used a racial slur while detaining a sitting member of the state's highest court." She paused, allowing the words to settle. "You are going to regret this for the rest of your life." Officer Mercer's breathing had become ragged. The Bodycam captured his hands, trembling now, the confidence drained from his fingers. His posture shifted, the aggressive stance collapsing into something smaller, more uncertain. I need to see some identification. You need to remove these handcuffs now. I can't just—" "Yes, you can, and you will." Justice Calder's voice carried the weight of 2 decades of judicial authority. "Because every second you keep me restrained, you're adding to the federal charges you're already facing." The officer fumbled with his keys. His hand shook as he unlocked the cuffs. The metal fell away, and Justice Calder rubbed her wrist slowly, deliberately, ensuring the Bodycam captured the red marks that were already forming. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a leather credential holder. She opened it with practiced ease, holding it where the camera could see clearly. The gold-embossed seal of the State Supreme Court caught the afternoon light. The words were unmistakable: State Supreme Court Justice. The officer Mercer stepped backward. His face had gone pale beneath his tan. The swagger that had carried him up her driveway had evaporated completely. I didn't know." "That's exactly the problem," Justice Calder said. "You didn't know. You didn't ask. You didn't investigate. You saw a black woman in an affluent neighborhood and you assumed she didn't belong." She lowered the credential, but kept her eyes fixed on his. "You assumed wrong." The Bodycam captured his face, the dawning horror, the realization that his career had just ended on this peaceful suburban driveway. "Your name?" she asked. He didn't answer. "Badge number?" Silence. "It doesn't matter," she said. "I'll have both within the hour, along with your personnel file, your training records, and your complete history of civilian complaints." She bent to pick up her scattered mail, moving with the unhurried grace of someone who had already won. "Start thinking about your defense attorney. You're going to need a good one."
The backup units arrived within 12 minutes. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing, pulling up to the curb in front of a house that had never before required police attention. The officers who emerged found their colleagues standing in the driveway, pale and silent, while a woman in casual clothes collected envelopes from the concrete. Sergeant Patricia Vance was the senior officer on scene. She had 22 years on the force and a reputation for thorough, by-the-book policing. She assessed the situation in seconds, the Bodycam still recording, the civilian rubbing her wrists, her colleague looking like he had seen his own ghost. What happened here? Before Mercer could answer, Justice Calder spoke. "Your officer detained me without cause, assaulted me on my own property, handcuffed me without probable cause, and used a racial slur while doing so. All of it is recorded on his Bodycam. I am State Supreme Court Justice Olivia Calder, and this is my home." Sergeant Vance's expression flickered, a momentary break in professional composure that revealed the magnitude of what she had just heard. She looked at Mercer. He couldn't meet her eyes. "Officer Mercer, is this accurate?"
He didn't respond. The sergeant turned back to Justice Calder. "Ma'am, I apologize for it." "I don't need your apology, Sergeant. I need your badge numbers, your incident report, and confirmation that this footage will be preserved without alteration." Justice Calder's voice carried no anger, only the cold precision of someone who understood exactly how the next several months would unfold. "I also need Officer Mercer placed under immediate suspension pending investigation." "Ma'am, I don't have the authority to—" "Then call someone who does, because in approximately 2 hours, the Attorney General's office will be receiving a formal complaint along with a request for federal civil rights charges. I suggest your department get ahead of this while it still can." Sergeant Vance made the call. Within 30 minutes, the chief of police was on his way to Maple Ridge Drive. Within an hour, Officer Ryan Mercer had surrendered his badge and weapon. Within 2 hours, the footage had been flagged for preservation, and Internal Affairs had opened a priority investigation. The lawnmower down the street had long since fallen silent. Neighbors had gathered on their porches, watching the patrol cars, the arriving officials, the quiet woman who had lived among them for 17 years and who now stood at the center of something that would change everything. Justice Calder went back inside her house. She poured herself a glass of water. She sat in her study, surrounded by the case files she had been reviewing before the mail seemed important. Then she picked up her phone and called her attorney. Internal Affairs completed their preliminary review within 72 hours. The footage left no room for ambiguity. Officer Ryan Mercer had approached a private residence without any reported complaint. No call had been logged to dispatch. No neighbor had expressed concern. He had acted on his own initiative, his own assumption that a black woman checking her mail in an affluent neighborhood must be engaged in criminal activity. He had demanded compliance without identifying any legal basis. He had escalated to physical force against a cooperative civilian. He had applied handcuffs without probable cause. He had uttered a racial slur that the audio technicians isolated and confirmed with equipment designed to detect whispered confessions. His incident report, filed 3 hours after the encounter, bore no resemblance to reality. It described a suspicious individual who had refused to cooperate and had exhibited aggressive behavior. It justified the detention as reasonable under the circumstances. The Bodycam showed a woman in sweatpants holding her mail. The Department of Justice opened a federal civil rights investigation within the week. The footage was reviewed by attorneys who specialized in police misconduct cases, who had seen hundreds of similar encounters, but rarely one so clearly documented, so unambiguously damning. The city's legal team assessed their options in a conference room on the 19th floor of the municipal building. They watched the footage 4 times. They listened to the enhanced audio of the slur. They reviewed Justice Calder's 17 years of property records, her 20 years of judicial service, her complete absence of any criminal history. They calculated the cost of litigation. They imagined that footage played before a jury, 12 citizens watching a state Supreme Court justice handcuffed against the wall of her own home while an officer whispered a racial epithet. They didn't imagine it for long. The settlement offer came within 6 weeks, $4.5 million, the largest payout in the city's history for an incident that didn't involve death or permanent physical injury. Justice Calder's attorney conveyed the offer. She accepted it the same day, not because the money mattered, but because a trial would have delayed the criminal proceedings, and she wanted those to move forward. She wanted the world to see what the Bodycam had recorded.
The federal charges were filed 3 months after the incident. Deprivation of rights under color of law, aggravated assault, filing a false police report, obstruction of justice. Ryan Mercer sat at the defense table in a suit that didn't quite fit, his attorney beside him, facing a prosecution team that had built their case around 47 minutes of Bodycam footage and the testimony of one of the most respected jurists in the state. The footage was played for the jury on the second day. The courtroom was silent as they watched. The approach,
the confrontation, the escalation, the assault, the revelation. The audio of the slur was enhanced and amplified, filling the room with a single whispered syllable that had cost a man his career and would soon cost him his freedom. Justice Calder testified on the third day. She wore the same black robe she wore on the bench, a deliberate choice, a visual reminder of the authority that Officer Mercer had violated. Her testimony was precise, chronological, devastating. She described each moment of the encounter with the same care she brought to her written opinions, each detail building toward an inescapable conclusion. The defense argued confusion, miscommunication, a regrettable misunderstanding that had spiraled beyond the officer's control. They suggested that Justice Calder's failure to immediately identify herself had contributed to the escalation. The prosecution's closing argument was 3 sentences long. She was checking her mail at her own house, and he assumed she was a criminal because of the color of her skin. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned with guilty verdicts on all counts. The sentencing hearing took place 4 weeks later. Officer Mercer's attorney presented character witnesses, colleagues who spoke of his dedication, family members who described his good intentions, a former supervisor who called the incident an aberration. The judge, a colleague of Justice Calder's, though not from the same court, listened to it all. Then he delivered his sentence. Officer Mercer, you were entrusted with a badge and a weapon and the authority to enforce the law. You betrayed that trust. You saw a black woman in her own neighborhood, in her own driveway, at her own home, and you decided, without evidence, without cause, without any legal basis, that she did not belong. He paused. You detained her. You assaulted her. You handcuffed her against the wall of her own house. You used a racial slur while doing so. And then you filed a false report attempting to justify your actions. The courtroom was silent. You will have 10 years to contemplate the consequences of those choices. 10 years to consider what it means to wear a badge. 10 years to understand that the authority you abused was never yours to abuse. The gavel fell. Officer Ryan Mercer was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, the same restraints he had once applied to others.
The footage spread across the country within days of the verdict. News networks played it on loop. Legal analysts dissected each frame. Social media amplified every second. The whispered slur was isolated, enhanced, and broadcast into millions of homes. But Justice Olivia Calder had no interest in viral fame. She had something more substantial in mind. 6 months after the settlement, she stood before the state legislature in the same black robe she had worn during her testimony. The chamber was filled to capacity. Legislators, journalists, advocates, citizens who had followed the case and wanted to witness what came next. "What happened to me," she said, her voice carrying to the back rows, "happens every day to people who do not have credentials in their pockets, people who cannot invoke the authority of a state Supreme Court, people whose word would not be believed over an officer's report." She paused, letting the silence settle. "I was lucky. I had a Bodycam recording the truth. Many do not. Many have their encounters filtered through incident reports written by the very officers who violated their rights. Many have no evidence at all, only their word against a badge." The legislation she proposed became known as the Calder precedent. Its provisions were comprehensive. Any officer who intentionally disabled, interfered with, or obstructed Bodycam recording during a civilian encounter would face automatic termination and felony charges. Any officer who filed a false report following a use of force incident would face the same.
Independent review boards would examine footage before official reports were finalized. Civilian complaints would trigger mandatory footage review within 48 hours. The debate lasted 3 weeks. Police unions objected. Some legislators worried about the burden on departments. Others questioned the cost of implementation. Justice Calder returned to the chamber for each session. She didn't speak again. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. The woman in the black robe, the bruises long healed, but the footage still fresh in everyone's memory. The bill passed with a 2/3 majority in both chambers. The governor signed it on a Tuesday afternoon, almost exactly 1 year after Justice Calder had stepped outside to check her mail. She stood beside him at the signing ceremony, her expression composed, her posture straight. Reporters asked how she felt. "This isn't about how I feel. This is about ensuring that what happened to me never happens to anyone else without consequence, that body cams record the truth, that false reports carry penalties, that officers who abuse their authority face the same justice system they claim to serve." She donated half her settlement to legal aid organizations serving communities that had no Supreme Court justices among their residents. She funded scholarships for students pursuing civil rights law. She established a foundation focused on police accountability training. Ryan Mercer appealed his conviction. The appeal was denied. He serves his sentence in a federal facility 400 miles from the city where he once wore a badge. His name appears in training materials now, not as a cautionary tale, but as a documented example of what happens when authority forgets its boundaries. The house on Maple Ridge Drive stands unchanged. The red brick catches the afternoon light. The oak trees shade the sidewalk. The neighbors still wave from their porches. Justice Olivia Calder still checks her mail in bare feet on warm afternoons. She still wears comfortable clothes on her days off from the bench. She still lives the quiet, private life she built over 17 years in a neighborhood where she belongs. The Bodycam footage is archived now, preserved in federal evidence storage, in news archives, in training databases, in the permanent record of a case that changed how an entire state approaches police accountability. The story ended without celebration. No victory speeches, no moment of dramatic reconciliation. Justice Calder returned to her bench, to her rulings, to the work she had done for 20 years before that Tuesday afternoon. But something had shifted. Something had been recorded that couldn't be erased. A woman checked her mail at her own home. An officer assumed she didn't belong. A body cam captured the truth. And the law finally applied.